Thank you, Rabbi Mashiach. Thank you, Shai. It's really good to be here. See everyone. I know many of you. Those who I don't yet know, I look forward to getting to know. And Rabbi Mashiach mentioned how this is part of Emet's couples division, and the couples division of Emet is the fastest growing part of Emet. As Rabbi said, on average, one couple gets married per week at Emet, and just in 2.5 weeks, from last week until March 12th, we have 6 couples that are getting married, and all of them different connections to the organization. Sometimes both the husband and wife were part of Emet, sometimes only one of them, and then as they get married, we adopt their spouse and make them part of the mishpacha. And really the secret sauce of Emet is the personal relationships and the personal connection. And even as we grow bigger, our goal, B'ezrat Hashem, is never to lose that personal touch. So I was just telling someone earlier today, I said, even if Emet has thousands of students, each one has to be the most important student. If we ever lose that, then it's not worth getting bigger. So it's, like I said, it's a pleasure being here. I'm going to try to cover a lot of information. So the topics that we're going to speak about, the 7 secrets of taking a good marriage and making it great, is many of the things we're going to talk about tonight are topics that really deserve a whole hour just on that. But my understanding is you have babysitters to get back to. 3 a.m. is not realistic. I could go till 3 a.m. I'll tell you something funny. When I just started Emet, Shai knows me from back then, about 18, 19 years ago, I used to be scared to public speaking. And we would have a guest speaker, and I would introduce the speaker, and I would be worried. I would take a shot of whiskey just to relax, And now they can't get the mic away from me, So Baruch Hashem, I've had a lot of opportunities at Emet. I also just want to introduce the man behind the microphone, very humble person, Rabbi Eliyahu Maximov. Maybe some of you have seen him on Torah Anytime and other places. And thank you, Rabbi, for multi-talented. And also, a very big thank you to the Yaakov family in memory of the Natan Ben Ksiyah, who help with the Emet workshops. I was actually at a wedding last night. Very special couple, both actually part of Emet, David and Irina. Maybe some of you know the couple. And I invited somebody at that wedding to come to the lecture tonight, to the workshop tonight. And the person says to me, he goes, "This is for good to great." He goes, "My marriage is not good." So, okay, I think he was joking, hopefully. I just didn't think he wanted to go out 2 nights in a row. But when we do these workshops, so one of the ideas is that the couples sit next to each other, and we try to create a little bit of space. There's not as much space as usual, but there's going to be a few times over this hour. We don't have so much time, so we're going to try to keep it short, but a few times where I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to give you a piece of paper, and I give you a few minutes to discuss it with your spouse, and then I'm going to come back over here, okay? Some of the ideas I'm talking about tonight, those who took my marriage class, which is my favorite thing I do at Emet, is a class I give couples before their wedding, a private class. I've given that class by now well over 300 times to different couples. And it's a private class, usually within a few weeks of the wedding. And I give a lot of information. Some of this will sound familiar, but we're going to go a little bit deeper now. And okay, we're gonna jump in. So I want to first share with you a story that I heard. This story did not happen to me, but happened to a different rabbi. And so when this rabbi was a teenager, he was in a local pizza shop here in Queens, Naomi's Pizza Shop. And at that time, he's sitting there with his friends, and he sees a couple on the next table, and the husband is loudly, oh, thank you, Shai, loudly saying to the wife, "Get me the ketchup." And the wife says, "I'm busy," thank you so much, "I'm busy with the kids. You get it yourself." And this is escalating. And these guys are a little bit uncomfortable. They're yeshiva boys from a local yeshiva, and they're not used to seeing this type of argument. And the wife is busy with the kids, and the husband's getting a little more annoyed. And he says, "Get me the ketchup." And she says, no. And it's going on a good few minutes, and then the husband had to use the bathroom. So he gets up, and the keys, you have to pick up the keys. At that time, you couldn't just use the bathroom. You have to get the key, and he goes to get the key, and he goes to the bathroom. While he's going to the bathroom, this rabbi, this later to be rabbi, you see he already had the tools to be a rabbi, he sees the wife is busy with the kids. He goes from behind, takes the ketchup, and puts it on the table. And she doesn't see who put it on the table. Then he watches over the next few minutes, and as the guy sits down, he sees the ketchup. He assumes that she got him the ketchup. So he starts talking nice to her. She assumes that he just calmed down. And he got her the ketchup. Someday he went to the bathroom and he's relaxed, And he's calm. And he sees them walk out of the restaurant like almost holding hands. And they were like fighting with each other, And just a few minutes later, they're friends. And I thought this is such a powerful metaphor for so many. This is not the first secret yet, but this is like you could say, a synopsis of everything. Of so many of the issues that we have in relationships. So much of the time, each person is waiting for the other person to show me that they care. And the other one is saying, you show me that you care. I'll respect you if you respect me. How can I respect you if you talk to me like that? How could I respect you if you don't respect my needs? And tension gets created, and stress, and all these different issues build up. And obviously, we don't always have the opportunity of somebody showing up in our home and dropping the ketchup on the counter. It doesn't always work like that, right? But I think with this metaphor, with this story, true story, we can really think about a lot of our challenges and the solutions. Okay, so we're going to jump into the first one. And this is something that I call being intentional. Okay? Being intentional. I came to this idea about a year ago when I was helping an individual who was going through some challenges in his relationship, who's very, very busy. And his schedule is nonstop. He has a very hard time with the work-life balance. Now, I can relate because my job is also very all over. And sometimes I also have a hard time with work-life balance. I had a little bit of an eye-opener when I was talking to this particular guy at 12 o'clock at night in front of his apartment about work-life balance. And then I hit me does this make any sense? I'm talking about work-life balance at 12 o'clock at night? What's my work-life balance for me to be talking about this, right? So I guess it takes one to know one, right? And this person has many businesses, and he's very successful, but he has a hard time with this. And he has 2 small children. And I was doing some counseling with him and his wife. And his wife calls me, and I could hear the smoke coming out of her ears, the steam coming out of her ears. And she says, my husband decided, he was barely home the whole week, and he decided to go on a business trip, and he forgot to tell me that he's going on the business trip. And she says, I don't understand. So I call the guy. I'm like, what happened? He goes, I forgot. It's busy, It wasn't intentional. So I realized a very simple, very profound idea, that in life, in our relationships, it's not enough to be unintentional. We have to be intentional. What our spouse is looking for us first and foremost is that we are intentional. What does it mean to be intentional? And it's interesting, because you're going to hear me say this a few times in this class, that our relationship with our spouse mirrors our relationship with Hashem. When we talk about the closest relationship that one can have, the human relationship, we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, is the relationship between us and God. That's the closest relationship that we have, is a relationship with Hashem. And when we think of the metaphor for our relationship with God, sometimes we refer to God as our Father. Sometimes we refer to God as our King. But the closest connection to Hashem, when we want to think of the closest relationship with God, we talk about God as like a husband-wife. Shavuot, the holiday of Matan Torah, is referred to as a chuppah between Hashem and the Bnei Yisrael. Shabbat, we say Bo'i Kala, Bo'i Kala. The book Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. Solomon writes a love story depicting the relationship between us and Hashem, but using the romantic relationship between a husband and wife as the model for a relationship between us and God. So we know those relationships are very parallel. And what does Hashem want from us when we pray? What are we supposed to pray with? Kavanah. What does kavanah mean? Intentional. Kavanah means to be intentional. It means to think about what I'm saying. We say the prayer in the morning, and I'm not saying I'm so good at this. We all need to work on this. We say the prayer in the morning, Pokeach Ivrim, the one who opens our eyes. What does it mean, opens our eyes? It could mean opens our eyes. But it also could mean opens our eyes. Because how often do we look at the same problem 100 times? 101st time we see the solution. So sometimes our eyes are open, but they're not open. We're in a relationship and we're stuck. And then sometimes we see it and we see it fresh and we see something very different. So Hashem wants us to have kavanah, to be intentional. Our spouse wants us to be intentional. Rabbi Wallerstein, Zichrono Livracha, it's a little clip where I saw he was talking about, he said, before I got married, or right when I got married, before we had kids, he said, me and my wife, we decided we're going to do all these things with our kids. We're going to take them on trips to the zoos, to the aquariums, the baseball. I'm going to take them to all different sports. I'm going to spend all this time with my kids. And then he said, first of all, I only had girls. So the sports was not exactly as popular as he was hoping, right? But he said, very often he sees people, the guy goes to a baseball game with his kids. And the whole game, the father's screaming, Yankees. And the kid is asking, Father, who's that player? Be quiet, And he says to his therapist, I took my kids to a Yankee game. What are you? You didn't take your kid to a Yankee game. You went to the Yankee game. Your kids are there, collateral, maybe to let your wife, for your wife to let you go, right? That's not taking your kids to the Yankee game. He has a description. He says a guy's in a restaurant with his kids, and he's taking out his kids to eat. Very nice. And then his friend comes in the restaurant. And the whole time he's talking to his friend. And his little kid is sitting on the table. And the kid says, Daddy, 2 minutes. Daddy, 2 minutes. Daddy, 2 minutes. Finally, what do you want? I dropped all the soup on my foot, But he's so busy. He's so busy talking to his friend, right? And this is not what our kids want, right? What our kids need from us is not the amount of time we spend with them. What our spouse wants from us is not necessarily, don't know if spouses get upset with me now, is not necessarily the amount of time that we're home or that we're available, but it's when we're home, being available, being present, putting away our phones, shutting off the phone for a half hour. I had this experience. One of my sons, who was in the yeshiva in St. Louis, Missouri. He's in Beis Medrash Chafetz Chaim over there. Last year, he came home for a few days. And I took him, we go bowling together, that's like our thing we do. And then we went to Cafe Muscat. And he knows I'm very busy, and I consciously took my phone and I shut it down, I left it in the car. I said, okay, if anyone's emergency, they'll call you. And I saw his face light up. Why? Because I was making a choice to prioritize him. And one of the advice I give couples when you go out on date night, so first of all, if you go on a date night and you take your phone into the restaurant, this is not date night anymore, okay? It's called a date with your phone, okay? It's and supper, okay? It's not a date night. Why? My advice is if you go with your wife or you go with your husband to a restaurant, whoever gets the most phone calls, whoever's most connected to their phone has to leave their phone in the car. The one who's less connected to their phone gets to bring their phone in. That's their prize. Because someone needs there's an emergency, the babysitter, the this, the that. And you're going to see, even if you're only in the restaurant for 1 hour, you're going to connect so much more. They did a study, fascinating study. They asked people, they looked at people who had their phones with them and see how much time they're connecting with their spouse or with their boyfriend, girlfriend, and they saw not so much. Then they had them leave their phone in their purse, in their wallet, in their pocket, and they were not allowed to take it out of their pocket. How much more time do you think they connected with each other? Much more, but not so much more. Then they had them shut it off and leave it outside, like this. Even if you're not allowed to touch your phone, just the knowledge that I have something in my pocket that has all that information, you're focused more on there than there. That's how addicted we are to these devices. And but here's the key, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later also. When you leave the phone in the car, you're actually making a choice to spend time with your spouse, and that's being intentional, right? When you go to shul right when it starts, or 2 minutes early, you're being intentional, right? Each of these things, it's not about the amount, it's not about the quantity, but it's about being intentional. Okay. Are you familiar with the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Okay, Stephen Covey. Those who haven't read this book, I very highly recommend it. From the secular books, it's probably number one. I try to read this book once a year, okay? It's a big book, it's worth it, okay? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The wisdom in that book, and it's extremely connected to Torah ideas. One of the concepts, one of the habits is seek to understand, not to be understood. First seek to understand, then to be understood. What do people very often do in relationships? Do you get what I'm saying? 2 o'clock in the morning, they're bothering their spouse. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Come on, you know what I mean, right? Come on. Let me go to sleep. No, you do. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You know why I said that. We want so much to be understood. Okay? Dale Carnegie, a very famous author also, he said, you'll make more friends in 2 weeks trying to understand other people than in 2 years trying to get other people to understand you. 2 weeks, right? You'll make more friends. I saw this quote recently that to the human being heard, being somebody listening to you, and being loved are so similar, we can't tell the difference. The human being cannot tell the difference between being heard and being loved. I saw this really beautiful story about Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a great sage who lived in Jerusalem, passed away about 25 years ago. He had an amazing heart. He cared so, in addition to being a huge Talmid Chacham, he had an amazing, amazing heart. And he would care about everyone, literally cared about everyone. And there was a story that I saw where there was a couple became Baal Tshuva. They became religious. They did not grow up religious. And they were part of a community of people that are now a religious community. And they were keeping everything, except the wife was not ready to cover her hair. She was keeping Shabbat, she was keeping Kashrut, but covering her hair, she wasn't ready to do. And it's very hard. It's very hard for someone to do that, especially if they didn't grow up with that. And they went to a lot of different rabbis, and the husband was trying to be very sensitive and not to push and not to do anything. Finally, they went to this big sage. And the husband goes in by himself to speak to the rabbi and get advice. And the rabbi sits him down, and for a half hour, the rabbi tells him like 10 different reasons why his wife doesn't want to cover her hair. It's part of her body. It's something she grew up with. It's something that it's her. It's like telling you to cover your hand. Whatever the reason was, he gave her 10 different reasons why she wasn't ready to cover her hair. And then he's like, okay, we're done. He looks at the rabbi like, well, you didn't give me advice. We're done. Okay, the rabbi says you're done. You're done, So he goes home. His wife asks him, like, you look a little perturbed. He's like, yeah, the rabbi didn't tell me anything. What do you mean? What did the rabbi tell you? So he goes on for a half hour to say everything the rabbi said. She looks at her husband and she goes, okay, I'm ready to cover my hair. I see Rabbi Auerbach understands me. And if he understands me, then I'm ready. What's the point? Because people want to feel understood. Sometimes we say things that don't exactly go in that same direction, but that's what we want to feel more than anything else. Now, in this class that I give, one of the highlights of the class is a question that I ask every couple who gets the class. And the question is, now that you're getting married, do you become one, or are you still two individuals? You guys remember that question? And then I ask another question. What's the closer relationship, parent-child or husband-wife? Somebody asked the rabbi's wife, why is it whenever I ask the rabbi a question, he answers me with another question? So she said, why not? Okay. So Jews love asking questions. So these are questions, right? So 2 questions, right? When you get married, you become one. And what's a closer relationship, parent-child or husband-wife? So regarding the second question, it's actually a little bit cheap. It's not really a fair question because it's a different kind of love. The love between a husband and wife is a romantic love. It's not a love that it's natural, so to speak. A parent-child is like a natural connection that they have. A parent-child, if they, God forbid, get into a fight, don't talk to each other for a few years, it should never happen, there's still love. Husband and wife, don't try that, even for a few days, right? It's a love that needs to be created. So I believe that the husband-wife relationship has ability to be closer than a parent-child. And I think the first reason is because that's a love that you created. It's not natural. Because it's not natural, it's more special. Additionally, it's a relationship that's forever. A parent-child, at some level, there's going to be a separation. Not every parent agrees with this, but technically there should be some kind of separation from their children. Husband-wife is a relationship, it's a bond that lasts till 120. But there's a deeper reason why I believe that a husband-wife is closer than a parent-child, has potential to be closer than a parent-child. And that has to do with a concept that the goal of a husband-wife relationship is to become one. The goal of a parent-child relationship is not to become one. If a parent-child become one, if you don't know who's the parent and who's the child, you call up the therapist and you give them a lot of business, right? It has to be a boundary. There has to be a parent and a child. If the parent acts like a child and the child acts like a parent, it's not healthy. But a husband-wife, the goal is, like I think of it like a pyramid. The goal is to become uno, echad, adin, to become one. The goal is to become one. That's the only relationship where the goal is to become one. The goal is to have no boundaries. And it's interesting because, and this is basically the pasuk in Bereshit says, "V'hayu lebasar echad." They should become one flesh. That's the goal. The goal of a husband-wife relationship is they should become one. And in that sense, husband-wife is closer than any other relationship because that's the only relationship where the goal is to become one. But then I ask another question, what's the best way to become one with your spouse? And what I would have thought when I got married, I would have thought the best way to become one is to compromise. Focus on what we have in common, which is a good advice, no question, good advice. But there's a very deep idea that I'm going to share with you in this idea, is that the best way to become one, and it's counterintuitive, it's the opposite of what you would think, but the best way to become one is to never stop respecting each other's individuality and never stop respecting your own individuality. Never stop respecting what makes your spouse different and never stop respecting what makes you different. Now, on the surface, this sounds weird. You're trying to become one. Why should you focus on what makes you different? It's going to make it harder to become one. If I focus on, if the husband likes sports and the wife likes art, maybe they should focus on the one thing they both like. Why should he why should he still enjoy? If a guy likes to work out, if somebody likes a certain thing. But here's a very deep idea, and this is based on attachment theory and psychology. I gave a few workshops about attachment theory, and if anyone is interested in reading some books about attachment theory, there's a very, very good book called Hold Me Tight by a woman named Sue Johnson. And attachment theory also is very, very connected to Torah ideas. Very, very connected to Torah ideas. And in attachment theory, there's the following concept. Attachment theory was created for small children, was based on childhood experiences. And Bowlby, who started attachment theory, basically came up with it in England when children's hospitals in England did not let parents be with their children. And the children were traumatized afterwards. And they realized that in order for a child to be a healthy adult, they have to have had a healthy attachment with their parent in early childhood. And if they didn't have the healthy attachment in early childhood, it's going to be hard for them to become a healthy, detached adult. In marriage now, they're using the same concept in the reverse. And what they're showing is that to be a healthy couple, we actually have to become attached, like the Torah is teaching us. There was an idea in marriage for about 30, 40 years in America that the healthiest relationships had no interdependence and no codependency at all. It's two people that don't need each other, basically. A husband doesn't need the wife doesn't need the husband, because we don't want any codependency. And this approach now is coming, and this is considered the number one approach for marriage counseling today, is coming and saying, no, That's not healthy. It is healthy to become dependent on your spouse, and there's a term they use for it now called interdependence. It's not codependent, which is considered like unhealthy, but interdependence, where you need the person in a healthy way. In essence, if you think about it, right, if the way to become a healthy detached adult is by having a healthy attachment with your parent, so if you're trying to become a healthy attached spouse, you have to have a healthy sense of self. You have to have a healthy sense of your own self. And this is a very deep idea, and again, there's a lot more we could talk about this, but we're just going to give like the quick version, is that when the Torah says, "Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha," love your neighbor like you love yourself, what does that mean? You have to love yourself. There is a concept in the Torah that a person has to have a healthy sense of self. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, "Im ein ani li, mi li," Hillel said, right? If I am not for myself, who will be for me? What does that sound like? Selfish. It's me. It's all about me. What does he say in the next line? Imani la'atzmi ma'ani. If all I am is for myself, what am I? And this is the ultimate balancing act of life. We know Judaism is all about balance. One of the main things that we try to teach at Emet is that Judaism is not about extremes. It's about balance. Rambam says, what's the best path in life? The middle path. A path of balance. You know where the Rambam says the only place not to be balanced? Does anyone know? Where does the Rambam say one place where you're not supposed to be balanced? Anger. The only place not to be balanced is anger. Anger, you have to go to the extreme away from anger. And he says, even when you're angry, you have to fake it. This is what Rambam says. I could show it to you inside. He says, sometimes you have to get angry at your kids. The kid ran into the street. You have to fake it. You have to make it look like you're angry. But you can never be angry. That's how bad anger is. But everything else in life is balance. Everything else in life, we're supposed to live a balanced life. What's the balance? I have to take care of myself. But I also have to realize that my greatest sense of self comes when I take care of somebody else. What does that mean? Life is a constant balancing act of self and other. Self, other. I have to keep taking care of myself. One of the things I talk a lot about to couples, and I try to live this way myself, sometimes it's harder, is to have a healthy sense of self and to take care of yourself. Self-care. Have healthy self-care. A lot of times I see nice people who put themselves last. I had a woman in my office a few weeks ago. She says to me, and in front of her husband, she says, I don't know how to take care of myself. She says, I don't know how to even make supper for myself. I don't know, I eat leftovers for my kids. Now, it's normal to do that sometimes. But she didn't even feel she deserved, so to speak, to make some food for herself, right? I've had couples come to me after having a baby. No one's good enough to watch our baby. So we can't go out, we can't do, right? And this is not healthy because if, like they say on the airplane, put the oxygen on yourself, then on the child next to you. If you don't have self-care, you're not going to properly be able to take care of someone else. You know where I see this? I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I've seen this with like parents who are in like their 50s who take in an elderly parent, their parents, into their home. And a lot of times, which sibling takes in the parents into their house? Usually, sometimes the oldest or the youngest, but it's usually the one who's like so nice, so giving, like the tzaddik of the family, the tzaddikis, the one who's always, everyone is there. It's like the heart of the family, who's always a giver. They bring the parents in, or they bring the family member in, which is a very nice thing, right? But sometimes I watch and I'll see 2 years later, the person becomes so resentful that they actually start becoming almost abusive to their parent because they depleted their energy source. They're depleted. And then what happens when a person gets depleted? Even the nicest person can be snappy and annoyed and all these different things if they don't have any energy left in themselves, right? So my advice to that lady or that couple who takes in the parent, I tell them, when your siblings come to you and say, thank you, thank you, thank you, you tell them, I don't need your thank you. I don't need your yashikoyach. I don't need your chazak u'baruch. You take mom every other Shabbos. You take her to the spa. I'm going to the spa on Wednesday. You take her. Don't be so nice. Don't be such a good tzaddik. Take care of yourself to a certain extent. Put the oxygen on yourself. And then you know what? You can have energy to keep taking care of your parent with a smile for many, many, many years, right? But we sometimes get addicted to the people saying thank you to us. And we say, oh yeah, okay, thank you, oh yeah, okay. And they see pictures on social media of their family members on vacation and all these different things. And like, oh, but thank you so much. No, I don't need your thank you, you know? So the concept here is, and this idea, is that the goal in marriage is to become one. If you want a little bit more explanation on this topic, I recommend watching a lecture that Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson gave for Emet about 4 years ago, called How to Like the People You Love. Okay? See, Roman is shaking his head. He remembers the lecture. It was hysterical. The entire place was on the floor the whole time. It was one of Rabbi Y.Y.'s best lectures, and he's an amazing speaker. And the lecture was called How to Like the People You Love. And I chose that title because of this, my interest in attachment theory. Because how to like the people you love means that you can love somebody but not like them. And you can like somebody but not love them. And our goal in our relationship, especially with our spouse, but even with our children and with our parents, is to love and like. Love is feeling that sense of oneness. Like is respecting the differences. And in, let's say, our relationship with our children. I could love my children and not want to spend time with them. I could love my parents and they're annoying to me. I don't want to spend time with them. I love and I like. If I love and I like, I find ways to connect. Then the love becomes stronger because it has a like. But that's especially true in our husband-wife relationship. That relationship needs the love and the like. I highly recommend listening to that lecture. I just want to make one thing clear. Whenever I give that class, I always say that the goal here is not to live separate lives than your spouse. You're supposed to share experiences, not go out, do your own thing every night. And whenever I say this, I always tell the couples, I say, please don't be the first couple that listens to this class, calls me a month after the wedding and says, Rabbi, that was a great class. We had an amazing honeymoon. I went to Mexico, she went to Puerto Rico, and we each had the honeymoon of our dreams, right? That's not the idea. The idea is not to live separate lives. The idea is to respect the differences. And here's the key part of this. What happens when somebody respects your individuality? What does it make you want to do? What does it make you want to do when somebody respects your individuality? Anyone? What do you think? What does it make you want to do when somebody respects your individuality? You want to reciprocate that. You want to respect their individuality. But there's even a deeper thing that happens when somebody respects your individuality. Your ego. Now, is ego a good thing or a bad thing? It depends. If you don't have any ego, you don't wake up in the morning, you don't start a business, you don't get married. If you have no ego, you're not going to do anything. But too much ego, especially in marriage, very bad. Ochem plocha, right? Too much ego in a relationship is very, very bad. It's very bad, right? So I have this saying, I don't know if maybe you'll like this or not, that in a relationship, you want your ego to be like a well-fed dog. Why do I say this? Picture a dog, big dog, okay? And just had a big meal. And it's sitting on the floor and you're like patting its head, right? This is what you want your ego to be. You have a big drive, but you feel content. You feel taken care of. You feel like, I don't need to scream. I don't need to yell because I know you're going to hear me. Why do people scream in relationships, in marriage in particular? Why do people yell? Because they don't feel heard, right? They don't feel heard. So they yell. But if I feel heard, I don't need to yell. Now, the ego, if the ego is very calm, right? And in relationships, we want our ego to be very calm. If the ego is calm, you're actually able to let go of yourself and become one with your spouse. And that's the magic of the relationship. When you respect each other's individuality, the person is actually able to let go of themselves and become one with that person. And that's the oneness that we strive for in marriage. But you never can stay at that point. Just like in our relationship with Hashem, we feel like one for maybe 60 seconds. And then we go back to our busy life. And we have to constantly strive to get back to that point. But life is a constant process of feeling like one with your spouse, going back to your individuality, and then reconnecting again. And actually, I think that you see this in the laws of Taharat Mishpacha, in the laws of family purity. Because in the laws of family purity, which we know is given to us by Hashem, therefore it can affect us on many different levels, right? Something that's given to us by God could affect us on many different levels. And there's metaphysical and physical and spiritual reasons why we keep the laws of family purity. But I think one of the benefits, so to speak, of family purity is that it reinforces the idea that we're discussing right now. It reinforces the idea, are we one or are we two? We're both. And just as you're feeling really close with your spouse, okay, we can't be physically together for a certain period of time. And what I tell couples is that even if you're married for 10, 20, 30 years, if it comes to that time you can't be physically close together, it should hurt. And if it doesn't hurt, you should go to therapy. Right? If you get to that time of the month and you're like, yes, more time to PS4, more time to use my phone, more time for Candy Crush, more time to right? That's not good. That's not good, right? It should hurt a little bit. But what does it remind us when we have that separation? I think one of the benefits is it reminds us that this person is a separate human being than us. Why is it important to remember that that person is a separate human being? Because if I don't remember the separate human being, I might stop thinking about how to connect entirely. Sometimes, the thing that's so close to you, you don't see. I don't see it, It's so close to you that you don't see it, right? So by having a time of separation, it doesn't mean a time of full separation, but a time where you have to separate to a certain extent, it forces us to remember that this is a separate person who I'm constantly striving to connect with. It's a constant process of connection. There's a lot more that we could say on this topic, but we need to go on. Okay. Now, I brought a few handouts over here. Okay, and this handout, also from Stephen Covey's book, there's a concept called the 4 quadrants. Okay. And this is a very, very important concept in relationships. It's an important concept in being successful in business. It's an important concept in almost anything in life. Okay, and I'm going to pass these around. Just take one per couple and then pass it around. Okay. Okay. So this is going to be the first exercise tonight. Okay. I'm going to explain this, and then after I explain this, I'm going to give you guys. Each of you, husband and wife, a blank paper. I thought we were going to have tables. Sometimes we have tables, but you could do this on your lap, I guess, and we have some pens over there. And I want you each to fill these out for like less than 5 minutes, okay? But let me just explain the concept over here first, okay? So this is 4 quadrants, okay? So over here is urgent, and this quadrant is important. Okay, so this square, this top left square, are things that are urgent and important. Okay, and examples of those are crisis, pressing problems, deadline-driven, and you could think of this as eating food. You could think of this as, at the most extreme, it could be, making sure that you have the lights on in your house, that the electricity bill is paid. It's urgent and important. All those things are urgent and important. So that's the first quadrant, okay? The second quadrant over here, okay, I'm going to ask you to skip down to the quadrant 4, okay? Quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important. Example would be Candy Crush, okay? Example would be social media. No offense to Sonia's prep, but social media. Example would be just wasting time, gossip, things that have no purpose. It's not urgent and not important, okay? Now, most people obviously try to be in this quadrant and not so much in this one. However, and this is the key part of this exercise, okay? This quadrant is urgent but not important, okay? Now think for a moment of things in your life that are urgent but not important. I would say an example would be you're sitting with your spouse in the restaurant and you get a WhatsApp message, right? Now, if you didn't listen to me and you have your phone in front of you, right? That WhatsApp message and you have the notifications on, your spouse is about to tell you something very meaningful and whoop, 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 right? And you are looking at your phone because your spouse, it's not so urgent, they're still going to be sitting there in a minute, so you think, but the message is urgent. The message is urgent. And then the last quadrant over here is not urgent but important. So what would be some examples of not urgent but important? Spending more time with your spouse, spending more time with your kids, taking care of your health, working on your finances to be better planned for the future, right? These things are not urgent, but they're important. And basically what Stephen Covey says is that the difference between really successful people and not so successful people, and when I say successful, to me, my definition of success is not how much money you have in the bank account, okay? Because I don't define that as success. Because if I show you somebody, if somebody shows me someone who has a lot of money in the bank account, but doesn't have a relationship with their family and is not a healthy person, I pity that person. I don't look up to that person. I'm not, God forbid, jealous of that person. Why? Because that person, I feel bad for that person. To me, a successful person is somebody that is integrated, someone that is able to connect, who sees what money is about, that money is a tool. Money is not an end. Money is a means to an end. So when I think of a really successful person, it's a person who prioritizes important but not urgent things. And I'm going to hand out this paper so you could do this a little bit yourself. But before I do that, I just want to share with you one thought. And just to bring home this point. Let's say you're a couple that's married maybe only 6 months, and your third cousin, who you haven't spoken to since the wedding, calls you up and says, can you please come to my birthday party? I'm making a birthday party for my wife tomorrow night. Please, can you come? It really mean a lot to me if you came. What does a nice person do? A lot of times, what does a nice person do? They say yes. They say, of course, we'll be there. Like, they want to just say yes because they want to be yes to everyone, right? Now, is going to that birthday party important or urgent? Urgent. So I would say it's urgent because it's tomorrow. And they forgot that they told their spouse that they were going to spend time together because the last 3 nights they weren't home. It's until late at night. So what happened? By prioritizing the urgent but not important over the important but not urgent, they're moving away from their spouse, not moving closer. So one of the advice that I give people, because a lot of people I speak to are nice people, and nice people have a very hard time saying no. They like to say yes. So one of the advice I give to people is that when the person asks you if you can come to the birthday party, it's a simple advice, but it saves people from so much problems. Put the person on hold for 10 seconds. And this is legal in 48 states, okay? Put them on hold for 10 seconds and say, give me a second, I need a minute. Put them on hold and stop and think for a second, what are my other commitments? How's my spouse going to feel about this? Maybe I made a commitment myself to working out and to going to sleep early because I am not getting enough sleep. And think about what's good for you. And if you realize it's really not necessary to go to that birthday party, you tell the person, I'm sorry, I have a conflict. You know who the conflict is with? Yourself, your spouse. That's legal, okay? I made a commitment already. Oh, sorry, next year. What's the point? The point is, if we just say yes all the time, and I'll give you another example from my marriage class, I always ask the couples the question. I say, imagine it's 3 months from now, and it's 9:30 at night, and you have to get up early the next day. I'm directing this at the wife. And you have to get up early the next day, and your husband, you're going to stay up to see your husband, and your husband calls you and says, sweetie, do you want to go out for sushi? What does a good wife do? So usually the wife responds, we go. What do you mean? We go. A good wife does. So the good wife does. And I say, no, I disagree. A good wife should, again, put him on hold, which is legal, put him on hold, stop for a moment and think about what's good for her. And if she's really, really tired, she says, you know what, I'm sorry, I just can't. If she's not as tired, but she's pretty tired, she says, you know what, get me this and this kind of roll, I'll set the table, make it nice. And then sometimes she should say, you know what, yes, I want to go. But what happens if she doesn't prioritize herself at all? 45 minutes later, they're sitting in the sushi place. She made herself a pretzel to go out to the sushi place. And the guy says something not so smart. He says something thoughtless. Guys do that sometimes, you know. He says a comment that's not so thoughtful. And you know how she responds? Like a tornado's coming, And he's like, where did this come from? It was a nice day. Where's the tornado coming from, right? But he has no idea that she made herself into a pretzel to go out. She's already holding on to a lot of resentment. And now he stepped on a landmine, right? So that couple's going to have less shalom bayit because everyone's trying to be nice instead of trying to think about also what are my needs. So I'm just going to ask you to take a few moments. If you need a pen, we have some pens in the back. What I'd like you to do is literally just take maybe like 3-4 minutes on your own, not with your spouse, and write down a few things, okay, that you feel either you are doing, or maybe your spouse is doing, okay, that fits into one of these categories, or it could be something that you want to be doing, okay? This is just purely to create a conversation. Again, we're not going to really have time so much now, but for afterwards as well, to create a conversation and to think about, like, let's say, for example, if you're writing on this quadrant, you could say, let's say important but not urgent, getting a gym membership, right? And you keep pushing it off, but this is something I want to start doing. Or you could tell your spouse, going out with your friends once a month, this is something I want you to do, okay? It's important but not urgent. Or I believe we as a couple are doing way too much, let's say, non-urgent, not important. We're binge watching Netflix till 3 o'clock in the morning and therefore not being able to function the next day, right? So which maybe once in a while is a good thing, but on a continual basis is not probably such a good thing, right? So, right? Okay, no, just do it. Just do this on your own for like 3 minutes. What? You could just discuss it between the two of you, okay? You can, if the sun was one big ball, you can fit 1 million balls of earth into the sun. And that's our energy source. Our energy source is the sun, right? But a laser beam can cut a diamond, and the sun can make us just nice and toasty, right? How does that work? Because what does the sun do? Thank God the sun is not destroying us, right? How does the sun work? It disperses. The rays are dispersed. And therefore it's able to give a little bit of light to everything. The laser beam is so focused that it can cut a diamond. That's what you say, laser focus. Laser focus, right? But if we have more the mindset of the laser in anything that we're trying to do, and again, this goes back to the idea of intentionality and the idea that it's not so important how much you do, but the consistency of what you do, right? Because if you do it consistently, like I've seen studies that if a parent makes an effort to spend 5 minutes with their kid before the kid goes to sleep, that 5 minutes compound, or whatever, dominoes, right? Can make a tremendous impact. So I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise, and if you don't have this paper, okay, anyone not have these papers? Okay? If you don't have this paper, just take a blank on one of your papers in front of you, make these 3 lines, okay? Just like this, just like I did it. A half line, a full line, and a half line. And to do this experiment, okay? I am going to time all of you. You don't have to take out your phones. I am going to time all of you, okay? And I'll show you how this is going to work. This is going to take us about 2 minutes, okay? If I can find my timer. Okay, this is going to take us 2 minutes, and this is how it's going to work. We are going to, on the top of the page, try to find, do it on a few papers, whatever. On the top of the page, you are going to write the letters A through Z. Don't do it yet, okay? On top here, you're going to write the letters A through Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? A through Z, and then right underneath that line, underneath this line, okay, you're going to write the numbers 1 through 25. So you're going to do A through Z, and then 1 through 25, okay? It's a simple task. See how long it takes you to do it, okay? Start. Again, everything is on the top of the page. Don't do anything on the bottom of the page. All the way on top, the letters A through Z, and then right underneath that line, the numbers 1 through 25, okay? Okay, again, we're doing everything on the top of the page, A through Z, 1 through 25. Nothing on the bottom of the page, okay? Just on the top. Okay, everyone done? Okay, now, this takes somewhere between 40 seconds, 60 seconds. It's a pretty simple task. You could do this with your eyes closed, basically. It's an easy task, right? Now here's the trick, okay? On the bottom of the page, I'm going to reset the timer. Here, you turn the page over, and over here, you're going to do it differently. You're going to write the letter A on the top, and then over here, the number 1. Then B, then 2, then C, then 3. You're going to jump up and down. Okay, I'm going to start the timer. You're going to jump up and down. You're writing the same letters A through Z and 1 through 25, but you're going to do it top, bottom like that. Right now. It's not a test. Don't worry. Did everyone get the point? Okay. What are we doing on the second exercise? We are multitasking, okay? And first of all, it takes almost double the amount of time. But more importantly, as Roman Mavasha said very beautifully, you have a headache when you're done, okay? And the people... No. The people who multitask the whole day, they feel so busy, okay? And at the end of the day, they tell their spouse, wow, it was such a stressful day, right? Because everything I was doing with like this part of my brain and this, and I got interrupted by this, and go here, and go there, and this and that. And we're constantly jumping between different things. I saw a study that if you get interrupted from a task, 40% of the time you don't even go back to doing the same task. And the amount of wasted time that happens is tremendous, right? So this is just an important point. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. I'm just going to go over quickly the last few secrets, okay? Now, this is a very important concept, to know the difference between comfort and pleasure, okay? We live in a society that is very comfort-driven. We are very comfort-driven. We want to be comfortable. We'll do anything to be comfortable, right? I think if our society, we've had a choice, we would live disposable lives, okay? Disposable cars, disposable spouse, disposable everything. Everything should be disposable. We don't want to do anything out of our comfort zone. But the truth is, right, if you think about what's the dream is to be a trust fund baby, have 100,000 come in every month. We win the lottery. What's the slogan for the lottery? $1 and a dream. You look at the data of people who win the lottery, they're not very happy, right? Statistically, they're not necessarily very happy. Why? Because we, as human beings, were not created to be comfortable, but we are created to enjoy pleasure. And when we talk about pleasure, we're not just talking about pure physical pleasure. We're also talking about higher levels of pleasure. Like Rabbi Noach Weinberg, he said there's 5 levels of pleasure. And the most basic pleasure is just like eating a steak. But there's higher levels of pleasure, like working out, because you actually feel good by putting in effort, and it actually makes you feel good. Bringing up children is not a lower level of pleasure. It's not I would say a kaif. It's not kaif, okay? It's not an easy pleasure, but it's a deeper, stay with us. It's a deeper, lasting, meaningful pleasure, right? Pleasure, right? Because we are not created to be comfortable. We are created to live a meaningful experience, meaningful life. And that meaning comes from effort. So this is a very, very important thing, and I think this next generation has a very big hard time with this. And our society, unfortunately, has become a comfort-driven society. But marriage will never be comfortable. Marriage, hopefully, can be very pleasurable. But if a person is looking for comfort in marriage, they're more unlikely to get pleasure either. Because pleasure, and again, we're not just talking about physical pleasure, we're talking about deeper levels of pleasure that come from a person working on their character traits, that come from a person giving and caring about each other. That comes from the effort that we put in. Rabbi Akiva Tatz, brilliant author and writer, he's about to come out with a new book about the holidays. And in that book, he has a section about happiness. And I heard him speak recently, and he was talking about the idea. It's such a brilliant concept. He says, if we don't have a goal in life, we cannot motivate ourselves. We need a goal. We need to be working towards something in order to motivate ourselves. But when you get to the goal, you look back, and it was the process that actually gave you the satisfaction. And many people, when they get to the goal, actually become depressed. They build up a company, they work really hard, they sell their company, and then they get depressed. Because Okay, I got to the goal. Now what? And in that whole process, I didn't spend enough time with my kids. I didn't do all these different things. So what was the purpose, right? So what we want to strive for in our relationships is to live a meaningful life and a realization that marriage and life in general is not about being comfortable, but hopefully it's about living a pleasurable life. And again, pleasure meaning not just physical pleasure, but pleasure working on ourselves. I saw a comic strip once. You see an alien from outer space. He's looking in a gym, and he sees all these people exercising. And the alien is sure that there's somebody there with a machine gun. Because why would somebody be exercising? Someone must be forcing them to do it, right? But why do people exercise? Even though it hurts, because there's a pleasure that comes from that. Why do people build a house? Why do people work on something? Because there's a tremendous satisfaction. The Gemara says 1 bushel of wheat that I make in my own field is more valuable to me than 9 bushels someone gives me as a gift. So there's a tremendous satisfaction that we get out of the effort that we put in, and a really good relationship takes a lot of effort and is never going to be fully comfortable, but hopefully can give you a very deep pleasure. The next one, efforts versus results. This is a secret that many, many people don't know, because we're living in a society that is extremely results-oriented. Our society looks at everything based on how big, how much, right? You ever saw a person try to take out a mortgage and they ask you, where's your assets? And you say, well, I have 3 businesses that I put so much effort in, they all failed. Are they going to give you a mortgage for that? In 2008 they did, right? And they get a big bubble happen, right? They don't give you a mortgage for that, right? Because they want to see tachlis, they want to see your assets, right? And we think in relationships also, it's all about results. But if you're married to someone who's not materialistic, the person is not looking for results. Just like we said before about intentional. They're looking for you to show your effort. And here's a very, very deep idea, and I'll just tell you a very quick little story. There was a couple that my wife and I were both learning with for their wedding about 12 years ago. And the wife says to my wife, we're getting married soon, and he hasn't said I love you, but I know he loves me. He wasn't so expressive, and he hasn't bought me flowers or given me a card. So it was my job to speak to the guy and ask him to do it, but I didn't tell him that I knew this. And I asked him, I said, did you give your fiance a card or flowers? He's like, no. I said, Erev Shabbat, you're going to do it. It was Thursday night. I said, I'm going to call you Motzi Shabbat to find out if you did it. I call him Motzi Shabbat. I'm like, did you give her flowers? He's like, we went to the florist to finalize the arrangements. The florist gave her flowers. I'm like, this guy doesn't get it. It's not about the flowers. It's about what it represents. And then I said, did you give her a card? He goes, Rabbi, is it so important? So I asked him a question. I said, does she give you a card? And he says to me, a card? She wrote me a book. I'm not exaggerating. He said, she wrote me a 28-page book of all her dreams. And what did he have with this couple? He's not so emotionally expressive, and she's very emotionally expressive, which is not necessarily a bad relationship. We're going to talk about that in a moment. A healthy relationship sometimes could be one person who's very outgoing, one person who's not so outgoing. I always tell couples, the most important thing is that you share common values, because common values is where you're going in life, right? Because if you don't share common values, you might make best friends in the bar, but you're going this way and they're going that way. And very soon you see you're not going the same direction. But, so you know what I told this guy? I said to him, I said, if you scribbled some letters and the word love is somewhere in there, she's going to think she won the lottery. Because she knows it's not easy for you. And the fact that you made the effort to do it, it's meaningful to her. And if she wrote you that same letter, it would be worthless to you, because you know she could do it in her sleep. So what is the message here? And to me, this is a very empowering message. Because one of the things we do in relationships, one of the biggest mistakes we do, is we look at other people. We look at other marriages. We're at a party with a lot of other people and we see how they're talking to their spouse. We see how they're looking at each other. We see how they're this. We see this. And we look at other people and we compare ourselves to them. We compare ourselves to an unrealistic version of ourselves. And we're constantly doing comparisons. But you're only married to one person, and that's your spouse. And if your spouse knows that this is a challenge for you, let's say you're a busy person during the day, and it's hard to remember to respond to your wife's text messages during the day. And you make an effort to reach out. You make an effort to respond. Again, intentional, small moment, small thing. How meaningful is it going to be to her? Very meaningful, right? Because she knows it's not easy. Because she knows it's not easy for you, it's more meaningful. And actually, I tell this to couples right when they get married, because sometimes couples, when they get married, they don't have so much money to buy things for their spouse. And they're like, I don't want to buy jewelry, I want to buy nice things, I don't have the money. So you know what I tell them? I said, imagine you're worth $100 million. And you buy your wife a $50,000 gift. how does she even know that you care about her? Maybe it's shut up money, right? 50,000 is like you dropped it on the floor, you didn't care. But if you only have 1,000 in the bank and you spent a thoughtful $20 gift, it might be more valuable. Now, I'm not having pity on the people worth 100 million. Kol hakavod. But the bottom line is that when it comes to our relationship, and this again parallels our relationship with Hashem, the Baal Shem Tov, the first Hasidic master, he very famously said that one person who's saying the Aleph Bet might be more valuable to Hashem than someone else who knows how to read all the prayers and learn all the Talmud. Because to that person, that was his effort. So I think it's very, very important to remember that in a relationship, it's about the effort, it's not about the results. Now, having said that, your spouse still needs you at home to help you put the kids to sleep. And if you keep saying effort, 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 it might not work, okay? But the point is, if we really make legitimate effort, it makes a very, very big difference. Okay, I'm just going to go a little further. This is something that I mentioned before, that it's healthy to marry someone who's different from you. But one of the things that I find is that sometimes the thing that attracts us about the other person later bothers us. So you could be attracted to somebody's very chilled personality, and maybe you're a type A person. But then when they're not on time, when you're ready to go to the wedding, you get annoyed at them and you take it personally that they're not on time because you would be on time to things. And if they're not on time, that's a disrespect. But hold on, did you marry yourself or did you marry somebody else, right? And the reality is that we very often get stuck in this. And I want to share with you a little story. I was giving a lecture about a different topic, and I see this couple after the lecture, and the lady says to me, I have a question for a friend. You know, we know what that means, right? And the husband looks like he wants to make a hole and like dig a hole down to the basement. And she says, when we got married 7 years ago, my husband's family disrespected me. The day after the wedding, they disrespected me. And instead of him standing up for me, you know what he did? He had the chutzpah to say, I'm making the problem. I should just look the other way. And the more I get upset with him, the more he spends time with his family. So I asked the guy, I'm like, no, you want to be close with your wife? He goes, yeah, they have 3 kids. He goes, I want to. I said, what's the problem? He goes, she makes a big deal about everything. So you know what I realized about this couple? I realized that she's a go-getter and he's a peace lover, which is nothing wrong with that. And until they got married, she saw her go-getterness, I don't know if that's a word, but she saw her go-getterness as her greatest strength, and he saw his peace-loving nature as his greatest strength. And 2 of him or 2 of her, it's not going to work, right? They complement each other, and it's all beautiful, except when she's disrespected. So what is she thinking? What would I do if someone disrespected me? What would she do? Stand up. And if she doesn't stand up for someone, it means she doesn't care. But he's not her. And the fact that he's not standing up means she's reading into it, you don't love me, you don't respect me. So how is she responding back? You're not a man. And you see how this goes, right? And before you turn around, why should they want to spend time with each other? So it's very, very important to remember that the thing we're attracted about our spouse is often something different that complements us, but to remember that we need to appreciate as well. Last idea, and I'm just going to give you this. It's there's a lot we could talk about this, but we're just going to do this quickly. This is based on. You just take one per couple. Just pass it around. Just pass it. Pass one per couple. Hold on one second, okay? Because I know it got a little late, so I want to just be able to finish, and then we can take questions afterwards if people can stay, okay? Okay. Does everyone has one of these? Okay. So, we love you too. Okay. You got one of these? Everyone got one of these? You got one of these? Okay. You take it. Okay. So let me just give you a really quick background about this man by the name of John Gottman. Okay, and if anyone would like, you can message me, and I'll send you a 42-minute class by him. Fascinating, fascinating person. Okay, John Gottman is a psychologist who lives in Seattle, Washington, and he is very, very famous for doing some of the most empirical data on marriage. His laboratory, so to speak, has interviewed over 30,000 couples over the past 30 years. Okay. One of the things he's very famous for is he claims he can see a couple talk to each other for 5 minutes if they're married for at least 6 months and predict with over 90% accuracy if they'll still be married in 5 years. Okay? He said many times him and his wife want to go out on double dates with other couples and they don't want to go out with them because they're afraid that he's going to predict their marriage, So he has some very, very interesting findings that he found, okay? And I just want to share with you a few of them. So start with this page over here, okay? So he basically says, actually you can start with this one, okay? He basically says that there's 4 horsemen or 4 things that causes relationships to go the wrong direction. Criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, okay? And these 4 things create a tremendous distance in relationships. He says, people think that they say in real estate it's location, 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 and in relationships it's communication, communication, communication. He says communication is overrated. It's important, but it's overrated. Because if you ever see a couple fight with each other, there's a lot of communication going on. A lot of communication. Verbal, nonverbal, right? They say 80% of communication is nonverbal. A lot of communication. He says the communication is not the main problem. The main problem is what's behind the communication, which is what he talks about. They come from these 4 things. And on this page over here, it explains it a little bit more in depth. I'm just going to go to this, and then we're going to go to the other side. Criticism, attacking the character of the partner at the core, different from a complaint, which focuses on the behavior. Why can't you do this right? What's wrong with you? Any comment like that, any comment that criticizes the person, makes the person feel very distant from us. Defensiveness, self-protection, retaliation to ward off perceived attack. Shifting, blame shifting, the focus away from the problem onto the partner's flaws. The problem isn't me, it's you. Contempt, treating the partner with disrespect or ridicule, thinking the other as lesser. Partner feels despised and worthless, using eye-rolling, sarcasm, name-calling. You're disgusting, you're so stupid. Stonewalling, withdrawing from the interaction, shutting down, or checking out. Now, why are these such big issues? And to me, at the core, this has to do with what is love. Now, in my classes, I make fun of the word fall in love because I don't think it's possible to fall in love. You can fall down the steps, God forbid. You can fall on the ice. You cannot fall in love. Love has to come from you. Love doesn't come to you. I know it's only a few weeks from Valentine's Day, but love is not this whole Cupid idea that you're struck by love. It's all a bunch of baloney, okay? Because love, true love, like we know the Torah teaches us, ahava, the Hebrew word ahava, the root of the word is have, which is to give. And if I ask you to put 2 words in a sentence, to love and to give, so in American society, unfortunately, you know what they would say? I love, and therefore I give. I love my wife, so I give to her. I love my children, so I give to them. I love my Cocker Spaniel, I give to her. But if I don't love, or if I'm not sure if I love, what do? I hold back, or I don't give, right? Maybe you take, but you don't give, right? And very often you have 2 people, they're each waiting for the other one to love and then to give. So what's the concept here? That a real relationship has to be about giving. What's the most valuable thing you can give your partner? Respect. Respect. That you value them, that you respect them. If you look at the Shema, it says, "V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha." I will love Hashem b'chol levavcha, with my heart, b'chol nafshecha, with my body, b'chol me'odecha, my possession. In that order. Because if it doesn't start with the heart, if it doesn't start with yourself, all the other stuff is not important. What our spouse wants more than anything else is that to know that we care, that we legitimately care. So the concept over here is that if we want to have a really good relationship, if we want to have love, it has to be predicated on accepting the other person, caring about them, giving them, really in essence, verbs. The verb of love more than the feeling of love, right? We very often talk about the feeling of love, but the feeling of love is a result of the verb of love, which is the action of love, the connection, the acceptance, right? We talked earlier tonight about trying to understand, right? In Bereshis, when we talk about the first intimacy between Adam and Eve, what do we call it? Adam yada et Chava. He knew Chava, right? He understanding someone or trying to understand someone, or sometimes understanding that you're never going to understand, is all a way of showing connection and creating true connection. So the opposite of true love is resentment, is negativity. And nobody gets into a marriage with the goal of becoming resentful of their spouse. But unfortunately, a lot of times this happens. So I'll just share with you a few ideas that he has to get out of that problem. So it says, instead of criticism, use a gentle startup. Instead of defensiveness, take responsibility. Instead of contempt, describe your own feelings and needs. Stonewalling, do psychological self-soothing. In one of his studies, I'm almost done. Okay? In one of his studies, he found that in a healthy couple, there's 5 to 6 times more positive interactions between the spouses than negative interactions. And in an unhealthy couple, it's more like 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. When he went into it, he didn't realize this. He thought it's going to be like maybe 2-to-1 in the healthy couple and 1-to-1 in the not healthy couple. But in reality, and this is what it tells us about the human being, and positive doesn't just mean you're beautiful, you're great, you're amazing. Positive could also mean that you put down your phone when they start talking to you. Positive is you make eye contact with them. Negative could be ignoring the person. But watch this. If somebody ignores you and then doesn't ignore you, they don't cancel each other out. If someone says something hurtful to you and then says something nice to you, you're not even. You need 4 to 5 positive things just to get to ground zero and then to be able to go up. And the idea here is that as human beings, we need to validate each other. We need to be able to say positive things to each other, to give love, like I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of like the 5 love languages, right? To give love the way that person needs to accept love, the way that person needs to be loved. So just to quickly review what we discussed tonight. So we started off with being intentional, right? The idea of kavana, the idea that it's not about the quantity, but it's about the quality, and it's about being intentional, not excusing ourselves by saying I was unintentional, but being intentional, and the importance of just a little bit of kavana, just a little bit of intentionality creates a true connection. The next thing we spoke about is seek to understand, not to be understood, which is the concept of trying to understand another person, trying to hear them out, not necessarily just getting your voice heard. We live in a society where people so much want to be proven right. They want to, like I tell this to couples also before they get married, you have to choose when you get married. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? You're not going to get both. Okay? It's like a truth statement in marriage. You cannot win an argument in marriage, right? Because if you won, right, if you convince yourself that your partner or your spouse that they're a loser, you know what you get as the prize? You get the loser. Okay, and nobody wins. But we live in a society, everyone wants to win. I have couples that call me all the time, Rabbi, this and this happened, am I right? I'm like, even if I hear both sides of your story, I don't even know half the story, right? But people want so much to be right. So it's so important in a relationship, seek to understand, not to be understood. Or first seek to understand, then to be understood. And the idea of being heard and being loved, and we said the story about Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that all that woman needed was to know that somebody understood her needs. We spoke about the idea of becoming one. Doesn't mean that you lose your sense of self, okay? We're actually supposed to hold on to our sense of self, because by holding on to ourselves, we're actually able to let go of ourselves. And this is like sort of the magic of a relationship, that we take care of ourselves, we hold on to our sense of self, we respect our spouse's individuality, and that encourages them, so to speak, to let go. So if you want to go to the gym and you just had a baby, and your wife says to you, like, what's the worst thing? I tell couples all the time, what's the worst thing she could say to you? The worst thing she could do is roll her eyes backwards and say, go. Okay? Because then you literally want to go to China. Okay? You don't feel understood, you don't feel respected, you don't feel right. If she says no, at least you feel needed. Right? But sometimes if she says yes, full-heartedly, a nice person is going to be like, it's okay, I don't need to go. Right? Because if my needs are taken care of, then I can let go of my needs. One of the advice I give couples, and I saw the Gemara, the Talmud says this, knock before you enter your own bedroom. Knock before you enter your house. What's the message you're giving your spouse when you knock before you enter a bedroom? I respect your space. I respect your boundaries. By respecting the person's boundaries, what does that make them do? Respect yours, but even more importantly, let their boundaries down, right? A lot of times in relationships, spouses get frustrated. Why are you not letting me in, right? But often the reason they're not letting them in is because they're trying too hard, right? And if you respect the other person's space, it actually allows them to. We also spoke about attachment theory, and there's a whole workshop I gave about attachment theory, but I recommended the class by Rabbi Jacobson, How to Like the People You Love. Then we spoke about first things first, the 4 quadrants, important, urgent, not important, and the importance of prioritizing as much as possible the important and urgent, the important and non-urgent, because in that quadrant, the important and non-urgent, that's when you make the most important decisions. That's when you create the healthiest relationships. The greatest sense of connection happens in the quadrant of important, but not urgent, okay? And sometimes it means you're allowed to say no. And remember what I said, instead of saying to yourself, I'm saying no, I'm not saying no to my third cousin, I'm saying yes to myself, to my children, to my wife, and most people don't have a problem with that, okay? So this is a very, very important idea. We also spoke about the idea of that multitasking doesn't really work, and the concept of focusing on one thing and getting great results. We spoke about the difference between comfort and pleasure, and about Rabbi Akiva Tatz, and the concept of that we're constantly shooting for a goal, but our true happiness is in the process. So enjoy the process, and realize that there's a tremendous sense of satisfaction in the process, and there's a tremendous pleasure in that. Atlantic Magazine did a study, and they asked 1 million people, who's happier? Those with children, those without small children. Those with an elderly parent, those without an elderly parent. And across the board, those without any responsibilities were happier. But that was a kaif happiness. That was a low-level happiness, right? They have to tell you multiple times at the wedding, kaifuya, 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 because you just spent the whole week's salary to hear blasting music, don't get me started, right? And a wedding you don't even want to go to, you're going to pay off a due to somebody else because the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world is the wedding, right? So then you have to they have to keep reminding you every 10 minutes, kaifuya, 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 right? During COVID, when there was those small weddings, they didn't have to tell kaifuya so many times because everyone there actually wanted to be there, right? So what the Atlantic Magazine, what they found is that when people didn't have any responsibilities, which is unfortunately where our society is going through today, people don't, the divorce rate went down in America the last few years. People are not getting married. If they're not getting married, you can't get divorced, right? The whole culture in America is not even to think about marriage. One of my students, he works in a firm, he's downtown Manhattan. I think most of the company was in their late 20s, 30s, some people even 40. Over 50 people working there, not a single person was married, right? Because the whole culture, unfortunately, has become away from this, because they're trying to live a life of comfort. But the reality is that the greatest pleasure and satisfaction comes from working on ourselves. I always tell people, marriage is the most unbelievable factory, so to speak, science laboratory for self-growth, right? You can work on yourself so much in marriage. I tell couples, what's the most important thing to work on in your marriage? And remember? Yourself, right? Because if you're going to try to work on that other person, you're not going to be happy. But if you're going to work on yourself, right? Because through your spouse, you see so much about yourself. People tell me, my spouse triggered me. They triggered my anger. You know what I tell them? You know what happens if somebody triggers you? If we take it literally, right? If you trigger me, right? That means I had a loaded gun with no safety on, ready to go, and you triggered me. So we could talk about the fact that you caused my gun to go off, or you could talk about the fact, why am I walking around with a loaded gun, right? And so much of relationships has to do with looking into ourselves and saying, why am I on edge, instead of why did you press my buttons? Then we spoke about the difference between effort and results, and how a relationship, both our relationship with Hashem, our relationship with our spouse, it's not about the results, it's about the effort. And exactly in the area where you have a challenge, it's going to be more meaningful to your spouse if you make even a little bit of effort. So don't look at your neighbor, don't look at somebody else. One of the 10 commandments is not to be jealous of another person. And the commentaries say, why is that one of the 10 commandments? Why is it one of the most important things in the Torah? Because a person who's jealous will never be able to do the rest of the Torah. A person who's jealous, who's looking at everyone else, who's not happy with who they are but wants to be somebody else, will not be able to follow the rest of the mitzvahs in the Torah. Just like the rest of the 10 commandments, if you're missing any, the most basic commentary is just like a chair that needs four legs, right? And if you're missing any leg, the whole chair falls down. The 10 commandments, if you're missing any one of these, the whole thing falls down. If a person doesn't appreciate themselves and is constantly looking at somebody else, they're not going to be able to really live a meaningful life. We talk about the idea of what attracts you today can annoy us tomorrow, that it's healthy to marry someone different from you, but then when they don't do exactly what you would do, try not to get offended because you didn't marry yourself. And then the idea from John Gottman about focusing on the positive in each other, trying to leave, like just like in your house, you want the carbon monoxide to be as low as possible, right? You don't want any bad, in fumes. You want the resentment in your marriage to be as low as possible. The way to keep the resentment low is to follow these steps. If you need to criticize the action, not the person, and don't hold that negativity inside. John Gottman says, if you saw a guy on Wall Street in the middle of the trading day and you say, tell me 4 positive things about your wife. If he can't tell you 4 positive things, it's not good. Because on the tip of our tongue, we should be able to focus on the positive in each other. If we're able to do that, then we keep the resentment very low. A very wise person once said to me, says, I don't tell you I love my wife. I tell you I want to love my wife. What's the difference between saying I love or I want to love? If I say I love, that's how I feel at this moment. I want to means, okay, if we're not feeling so close, what can we do to create more closeness and more connection? And this is the Torah's idea of ahava, which is based on the concept of giving. Chazak Baruch, everyone. Enjoy your evening.